chain partners in catalyzing and supporting sustainable peri-urban circular bioeconomy systems. It's a lot of words. But what we're really here to talk about is how the bioeconomy can be further enabled to help deliver solutions to the triple threats that we're so focused on at this meeting and in other UN forums around the world as we deal with climate change, biodiversity loss, hunger and malnutrition. These are enormous global challenges that are seeking solutions. And the good news for agriculture and the food systems is that the bioeconomy is an important solution pathway that we can further develop to deliver what the world needs, which is improved quality of life. Today, we're going to be hearing from a distinguished panel of experts who have been thinking about the bioeconomy and thinking about how circularity can be enhanced. And I'll be your moderator today. My name is Ernie Shea. I work for a nonprofit organization called Solutions from the Land, and we are a farmer-led NGO that is working to bring farmer voices forward into these discussions because they are on the front lines of experiencing the impacts of the challenges that the world faces, including climate change, but they're also the folks that are delivering the outcomes that we're looking for. So I spend my day-to-day life working with farmers in the United States and in other parts of the world, and that'll be part of our program today. So I'm here on behalf of the private sector mechanism, which is co-hosting this event along with Pinion, Syngenta, and the Global Dairy Platform. And these co-organizers have put today's program together. So we're very happy to be teaming up to bring this to you. In terms of the run of show, we're going to begin with opening remarks. We'll follow with a panel presentation, and that'll probably take us somewhere around 40 to 45 minutes. And then what we're most interested in is a conversation. So we're going to open the floor to questions. So please be thinking about this topic and what questions you want to pose to our moderator as we go forward. So that's the run of show. And we started just a few minutes late, but our support team at FAO has assured us that we can use our full 75 minutes. So if you're watching the clock and we're a little bit running past the quarter past hour, we can keep going, they said, until 10 o'clock or they throw us out. So we'll see how that turns out. Okay, with no further ado, let's turn to our opening remarks. And we're very fortunate today to have with us the United States Minister Counselor for Agriculture in Rome, Ellen Lugar, to deliver opening remarks. Ellen serves as the Minister Counselor of Agriculture in Rome for the Foreign Agriculture Service of USDA, where she works with the United Nations agencies on global food security and represents U.S. agriculture in all of these forums. Prior to this role, she was the Vice President of Global Philanthropy and Volunteerism at the General Mills Foundation, where she led initiatives to increase food production in Africa and India and collaborated with international food and nonprofit organizations. So quite a mixed experience there that I'm sure will add to our rich discussion today. So Ellen, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thanks, Ernie, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see you and look forward to the panel and the discussion. And thank you, Ernie, for all the work that you do on behalf of farmers. And with that, why don't we get started? So, excellencies, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to just again thank the organizers, the co-sponsors of this event for inviting me here to deliver opening remarks. I think some of what I say is going to not be news to many of you, which is by 2050, I think many of you are aware that the world's population is expected to reach close to 10 billion people. 70% of whom will be living in urban areas, mainly in low and middle income countries in Africa and Asia. As urbanization rapidly transforms our global landscape, understanding and supporting urban and peri-urban agri-food systems is really becoming ever more critical. However, agriculture in urban and peri-urban areas faces a significant challenge that agriculture in rural areas does not: limited land availability. So in order to thrive, producers need to innovate, apply technology, and develop systems that take advantage of short value chains and close proximity to consumers that offset the disadvantages of land constraints. So we see food producers and their value chains move towards systems that reuse, recycle, and repurpose resources, and embrace the circular bioeconomy approaches. This is why urban and peri-urban agriculture is really a hotbed of innovation, and why it is in this arena that some of the most promising trends in agriculture can be found. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is proud to support urban agriculture and innovative producers, including through the USDA Urban Ag and Innovation Production Program. And this program, as many of you I think know, provides grants to support efforts by farmers, schools, cities, and others to increase urban and peri-urban food production, including by providing training and education, funding infrastructure needs, and promoting climate resilient practices. Many urban and peri-urban projects supported by USDA incorporate circular economy approaches. One example is the Composting and Food Waste Reduction Cooperative Agreements Program. I think USDA needs to do some work on titling and naming these programs. And this program supports local governments with projects that develop and implement community composting and food waste reduction plans. Projects like these increase access to compost for agricultural producers, improve soil quality, and promote innovative, scalable waste management plans that reduce and divert food waste from landfills. At its best, urban and peri-urban can bring communities together, connect producers to consumers, and build more inclusive, sustainable food systems. In summary, wherever you grow your food, whether it's on rooftops, in containers, or in community gardens, urban and peri-urban agriculture is a promising source of nutritious and affordable food. And that also supports food security while reducing poverty and inequalities that can help create sustainable and resilient cities. I'm very much looking forward to addressing the challenges and opportunities presented by urban and peri-urban food systems, hearing from our panelists, and look forward to today's discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you so much for that great setup, and it not only outlines challenges, but the good news of opportunities and how we can learn from each other, particularly across the urban, peri-urban, rural divides sometimes that are out there. So that was a wonderful beginning. Okay, we're going to now hear from 4 speakers, and I'm going to be your last mini speaker here, who are going to be outlining how they're engaging around the bioeconomy in urban, peri-urban landscapes. And we've selected our presenters to each take a slightly different focus and tack, because there are many tools in the toolbox that we're using to become more efficient and deliver the outcomes that the world needs. Our first speaker, and I'll introduce them individually and then turn to them for remarks, is Andy McFarlane. Andy is director of Fonterra Cooperative Group in New Zealand, but more importantly, in my book, he's a farmer, which gives him extra points. Andy's a strategic thinker who's very passionate about his operation, along with the processing, delivery, and presentation of food and its co-products to consumers. He's a director of Azenco Fonterra and chairs the SFFF Plantain Project, which introduces the concept of bioactive compounds in pasture at scale. It's my pleasure to introduce Andy, who is going to talk with us about how circular systems can deliver improvements in transport, storage, and marketing of dairy products, particularly helping smallholders. So, Andy, welcome.
Thanks, Cindy. And of all is that, thank you. What I would like to say first of all, I don't think New Zealand could claim to be an expert in urban agriculture because there's only 5 million people, so we have very few customers that are close into the cities. But what we are an expert in is getting products to the world, and therefore logistics and supply chain. And I think some of those lessons could be applied where there are large urban environments, and therefore the customers are close. What it does also do, though, is that we don't compete with ourselves so much because our competition is offshore, not onshore. So the dynamics are slightly different. We just go to the next slide, thanks, Emma. But what that does mean is New Zealand is what I would probably best classify it as a nutrition gap filler for global supply chains. And therefore, because of that, we depend on high quality processing, logistics, storage and market access. And what we call the fall of milk or the fall of meat, the breakdown, the consumer demand doesn't always match the way the supply side comes, and that's why we fill an important global role. And we look particularly at nutrition density, and I have got a slide later I can refer to, but nutrition density is a key issue when you're trying to not only feed the world, but it's more about the micronutrients associated with that and how you feed the world well to make sure people are healthy. We do have out of New Zealand a bias towards Asia, and that's for two reasons. One, it's closer at hand, but secondly, that's where our best trade access is. So, you fish in the pond where the fish are. But it is two-way. So we have low phosphate reserve or zero phosphate reserves in New Zealand. So, for example, from North Africa, we bring in phosphate, which we turn around and export product. We could have the next slide, thanks, Omar. Our farming systems, and I just put a picture of my farm at home there, just as an indicator, we have a high degree of circularity about it. And it's probably the closest country I could think of in the world would be Ireland, would have a number of farming systems similar to this, but it is unusual internationally. So we have pastures, our animals are outside all year round because we have a temperate climate, and they graze. We have legumes infused into the pasture system so that we can recirculate the nitrogen. So we have a low nitrogen, imported nitrogen dependence, although we are trying to get it down significantly, but we recirculate the dung and urine in a manner as opposed to housed farming systems, which are different because you collect it all in one place and then put it back out through irrigation systems. Thanks. Next slide. I was in Africa through Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya last year, and I did study some of the how the farming systems operate, and they're very different. But obviously, with a lot of people close at hand, the urban and peri-urban bioeconomies is actually very important. And the key thing I noticed really was that the productivity had a lot of potential to grow if you wanted to be able to increase the nutrition density, but also there was a side benefit of reducing the carbon footprint from those animals. But it's a matter of how this is near Arusha in Tanzania, that photo, but it was a matter of having a close look, and I was looking at the feed on the left, how that could drive productivity. Thanks. Next slide. So the way, and I'd just like to perhaps stimulate some thinking about this, when you talk about circularity, it's a matter of how the circle goes around, and so I tried to put it into a format where we could think about it and perhaps discuss it. And to me, the bottom of where things start is in the water and the soil, and that is the area that's internationally has got quite a bit of degradation going on. And then, of course, they support the plant life, and some of that plant life goes directly to the food system, to the crops up on the top left there. Some of it goes through animals, feed crops to animals, and of course the animals can not only produce food up the top, but they produce energy which can be circulated around as well. And the key thing about better nutrition and better health for people is that it comes back down on the right-hand side to what I would call collective effort and collective capital. And of course, I represent Fonterra, which is a co-op. And that collective, how you get people to work together so that 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 is quite important. And where the collective effort comes in is around on the left there with science and technology, what we do, and water management. And they are key issues, and so you can do that on a micro scale in a peri-urban environment. It might be collecting water from the rain roof, or you can do it with large-scale irrigation schemes. But whether you do it on a micro scale or a macro scale, it's really important. And the farm management is up the top left there is what I would call the integrator mentality, how the farm management can think about all of those things together, because we all know in food production that you're only as good as your most limiting factor. But if you get all that circle right, then you've got what we would call bioeconomic success. So if we could just go to the next slide. So then if we just move on to the logistics, and I just thought I'd give you a little bit of an example of how we might think about supply chain logistics thinking. And this is where in a micro environment it's also quite important, because I've started with renewable energy as a key part of the circular economy. And in the developing world, which some of our customers are in the developing world and some of our customers are in the developed world, but we effectively, and from New Zealand, we don't have trade access to the wealthiest people in the world. That the global customers are probably at the middle class customers. But if I just gave you an example about why renewable energy is important, to get good food and nutrition, we either need to, in the case of milk, which is our core business, or meat, you either need to refrigerate it or work out a way to make it ambient stable. And either way, you need renewable energy, preferably green energy, from solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, etc., or recycling waste product. But you need energy at a macro scale for refrigeration, or a micro scale refrigeration or macro scale to process it to make it ambient stable. That gives you food safety. You then have your communication and optimization systems. By optimization, I mean, how do we link what you supply today to what you manufacture tomorrow to what the customer needs the next day? And then distribution systems, and then technology that can democratize those systems and labour efficiency. I'm happy to give you a few examples of that technology, and that ends up with nutrition as the outcome. Thank you. But what we have observed in our part of the world is that for a and I think it applies internationally, for a circular bioeconomy to work, it requires a cooperative mindset, trust, and a multi-generational view. And if any one of those three things fails, then the system breaks down. And I think probably, and from an international point of view, trust is a key one, because that drives those other things. So we're not experts in a peri-urban economy, but we do have a lot of experience in our short life in New Zealand, 150 years. That's as long as we've existed from a trade point of view, that we could apply to food systems in the developing economy. And I think there might be one more slide, Omar, thanks. And the reason that last one I put up was at home, but this is where I've been looking at circular economy principles in Kenya and Tanzania. And I think that what I observed is exactly the same principles applied. It's just the scale that you do it, whether it's a micro or macro scale. So I'll leave it there, and I can come back with some other examples later if we need to. Thanks, Ian.
Great, Andy. A lot of food for thought, so be jotting down your questions when we get to the Q&A session. We're now going to look at a different dimension of the circular bioeconomy in urban landscapes by focusing in on data management tools. And we're fortunate today to have Peter Martin with us from Pinion Global Network. Peter is a principal at Pinion, where he helps businesses optimize operations, drive growth, and navigate transitions through data-driven insights and strategic planning. With deep expertise in production agriculture, he empowers farmers, ranchers, and dairies to make informed decisions while also offering financial growth consulting across diverse industries. Peter, welcome.
Ernie, thank you very much. And I wanted to take a second to thank FAO and the CFS team for having us here. It's been a great start to the week and looking forward to the week ahead as well. Moving from linear to circular, and as Ernie said, I'm going to take a little bit of a different twist. Much of what we're going to be talking about today in this session is about natural resources and the circularity that can occur within natural resources. But as we were preparing for this, it struck me that human capital and knowledge share can be just as important in this idea of circularity. And moving from a supply chain where it has linear transmission of this to more circular transmission of that human capital and information is a really valuable part of helping peri-urban and urban farms survive and thrive. Now, peri-urban farms often face significant obstacles to their longevity due to resource scarcity, low margins, difficult logistics, and urbanization. And data-driven information exchange can be vital to addressing and combating these challenges. To drive this effort, we need to empower farms to capture and leverage standardized, usable data to provide a foundation for the knowledge share. The goal here is simple: better information flowing freely in the supply chain to drive farm longevity and success. Now, in order to do this, there's a couple of steps that I wanted to highlight today, and I wanted to keep this to just a few steps that I think will move this discussion faster. First one is we've got to tackle the challenge of getting good information on farms. Capturing good standardized information is a really difficult thing on most farms across the globe. Even the most sophisticated of operations struggle with the complexities around taking operational data sets, the sensors, the hardware, all of the on-farm technology, the Internet of Things, and then trying to bring that information back to the farm office and have any chance of marrying that data up with accounting records or bank records, or even just the ledger that you're keeping on a piece of scratch paper. Trying to get information, again, flowing across the farms and coming together is sort of the gold standard and yet elusive at best. So we have a couple of needs that I think we as the industry need to focus on. First, we need the industry to create simplified data collection methodologies that focus on standardization and the ability for those systems to talk to each other. Having 47 different pieces of software and technology on your farm that don't talk to each other doesn't really get us very far. We need things that are interoperable with each other, and we need them to be simple. The second, and probably the bigger challenge that we have to overcome, is the hesitancy to change of implementing these systems on farms across the globe. We need those farmer mindsets to change. We need the people who are working on farms to move more towards a model where they are capturing information and they are focused on getting standardized data. Now, step two, once we start getting to the place that we actually have data to look at, the next place is we need to start aggregating and interpreting this information. What can both the farm and the supply chain learn using this information, and how can they inform each other along the way? We talk a lot about regenerative farming practices, for example, and perhaps in a particular region, growing cover crops may in fact be very difficult, cost prohibitive, or may not create the outcomes that we want. Data drives the decision around how can we improve that cover crop adoption and usage. How can we make that better for that farm? How can we make it better for the sustainability of food production related to that organization? Having data that tells us what's working and what's not working related to the growth of that cover crop will allow other participants in the supply chain, perhaps providing seed or other inputs, to better produce products, to better sell products, to better match products up to help that farm be a thriving organization. Getting detailed and accurate cost production information paired with production outcomes like yield and price would produce a nuanced look at the supply chain that just today does not exist at our fingertips. Okay, so then third, let's talk about then the collaboration. the circular nature of what we can do with this information. And I use an example of a client of ours who wanted to embark on a partnership with players in the supply chain to provide high-quality cotton in a very sustainably grown way from a woman-owned farming operation. This took some outside-the-box thinking, but more than anything, it took good information for that farm, for the input suppliers, for the retailer that they ultimately partnered up with, to all come together and say, to do this right, we're going to have to defy the way we've done things in the past. The existing cotton logistics supply chain will not work. We're going to have to do things a bit different. But each of those had to come with a mindset of, we trust each other, we're going to work together to come up with a solution that works for all of us, and we're going to use data at the foundation to drive the decisions that we're going to make. Now, there's some challenges that we need to figure out here, and unfortunately, I don't have all the answers for these, but that's why we're here. We're going to talk through these and see what we can come up with. The first is, how do we address data privacy concerns? This is a significant issue that we in agriculture are going to face in the coming years and decades. We do not have this figured out, and especially as we start sharing information across borders and into broader environments, we're going to have to wrestle with how are we going to manage data privacy? How are we going to manage who owns that data and when that data can be aggregated and what can be done with that data? So we have to tackle that. Second, the question we get a lot of times is, I'm not sure as a farming operation, I want other participants in the supply chain to know what my costs are and to know what's happening on my operation. That concerns me. And that is a real issue that we've got to face. While we want to believe that everybody in the supply chain will use this to better the world that we all live in, the reality is there are likely some that come at it with more nefarious interests about simply lining pockets. And so we do need to protect where that data goes and what level of data is put in the hands of other people. I don't think that the fear of several bad actors within supply chain should keep us from arming peri-urban, urban, even rural farms with great information to better manage their business. But I also understand that this is a concern that we have to address. Finally, our cybersecurity threats. Something that I'm not really sure in agriculture we spent much time thinking about until just the last few years, and we better start spending a lot of time on it because this is becoming real. We are growing the world's food, fuel, and fiber, and there are bad actors out there who are going to want to interfere with that. And as farms across the globe start adopting more and more technology and software and the Internet of Things, we have some major areas of watch. We have some areas of significant risk that we have to address. And so we need a combination of the industry, of governments, of NGOs to come together and figure out how are we going to properly manage the cybersecurity threats on such a critical infrastructure area. So with that, I'll leave you with these final thoughts and then we'll get into the discussion a bit later on data. Global food security and food availability require thriving farms. And the world needs to understand how our food, fuel, and fiber are grown. At the root of both of these important ideas is standardized data. The food and ag supply chain must find better ways to capture, circulate, synthesize, and act on this information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. These challenges cut across all types and scales, so lessons learned from rural to urban, peri-urban will be, I'm sure, part of our discussion today. Now we're going to turn to our third panel member who's presenting remotely, and I am happy to introduce Zuzoe Ramirez-Hernandez with Syngenta. She is the head of climate and nature. Zuzoe, are you with us?
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Perfect.
So I hope you can hear me.
Great. Let me just
Yeah.
wrap up your introduction and turn the floor to you. So Zuzoe serves as head of climate and nature for Syngenta Group, where she oversees the establishment of the group's decarbonization agenda and the strategic plan for nature-related activities across all of their business units. Her strong focus is on the decarbonization journey that Syngenta has been on, which includes Scope 3, upstream and downstream initiatives. She's also the key account manager for collaborating with their largest NGO partner, the Nature Conservancy. Zoe brings 13 years of experience from BASF, where she held various leadership positions before moving over to Syngenta in January of last year. So Zoe, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It is really a great pleasure for me to be here with you. And I'm very sorry that I cannot be on a face-to-face format, but as you can hear from my voice, I've been quite sick in the last couple of weeks. It is really a pleasure and very inspiring to be here with all of you. I was extremely inspired by the opening speech because this is all about technology innovation, and also by the latest speech where we talk about data. And when we think about peri-urban agriculture operates at the boundaries of the urban and the rural areas. And as we have heard already, they are facing several challenges. One of these challenges is, of course, the space constrictions, but also there are many environmental pressures they are facing. However, peri-urban areas are fundamental for the food systems and really to support, urbanization in the future. So circular economy is extremely important, to drive and foster innovation within peri-urban areas. And very importantly for us, it's basically looking at resource efficiencies. Can you still hear me well, or because I hear a little bit of noise in the background?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. In this context, innovation is going to be playing a fundamental role on peri-urban areas. Very importantly, as a space is restricted, here we have improved productivity as a top in the agenda. So we need to continue supporting growers, especially in peri-urban areas, to drive productivity. And by driving productivity, they can actually be very efficient on the resources, very efficient on the way they are using the land, and of course also improve other activities like soil carbon sequestration. We also hear in the opening speech the need of soil health. And this is extremely important, to try to keep the healthy status of peri-urban areas very, very well conserved, because of course the areas are restricted. And here soil carbon sequestration, by minimizing any kind of soil disturbances, is going to be playing a fundamental role. But also in peri-urban areas, they are being tackled basically by different weather conditions, very volatile weather conditions. So we need to be able to, in peri-urban areas, to also reduce the impact of farming. And it means that reduce greenhouse gas emissions as a very important element on decarbonizing agriculture. Here is again where efficient use of resources is going to be playing a fundamental role. Efficient use of nutrients. And also, of course, here, the precision application of the inputs, which is something that we are very strongly driving in Syngenta, is going to be fundamental to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And very importantly, of course, the post-harvest losses. So there is a lot, of course, of post-harvest loss in peri-urban areas due to the pest infestation, but also because of transportation. So here technologies are going to be playing a fundamental role to actually drive this topic forward. So what I wanted to share in this slide here is the fundamental role of innovation and technology to continue supporting peri-urban areas. In my next slide, I will very quickly present to you that, of course, we need to actually think about innovation that goes beyond synthetic innovation. So this is more related to biological innovation. So what we are trying to do here is to offer additional solutions for these peri-urban areas where, of course, space is limited, but also the proximity to the urban areas is there. So we need to be very careful about how to apply, crop protection products, for instance, and how these farmers could actually use biological products in order to have a biocontrol to also actually replace the maximized use of fertilizers by replacing with biofertilizers or biostimulants. So these are going to be basically additional tools in the toolkit of the farmers that is going to be fundamental for them to actually continue driving productivity, to reduce the use of resources, to actually make a better use of the land that they are using. And very importantly also, as it was presented in the last presentation, so it's basically data and data management systems. I really love the fact that we have here that we need to develop systems and platforms that actually can connect with the different systems that the farmers are currently using. Otherwise, it's really a very complicated play for farmers. So in my next slide, I would like to share also some of these innovation that we are currently having on digital solutions that are basically trying to connect so the different type of tools that the farmers are actually using in order to actually access the data of high quality. And by accessing this data, farmers can actually take a well-informed decisions about how to operate their land. So in this context, in Syngenta, we are fostering quite a lot digital platforms that can communicate with other systems so that are not only unique of Syngenta, but actually can actually make this enablement of supporting farmers in their journey. And we are fully aware that farmers are using different types of data management systems. So by offering our platforms, we can connect, plug and play, all these other systems and support growers on the decision taking. Precision farming, very important aspect on the circular economy for actually minimizing the use of resources. This is something we are fully driving in Syngenta, not only for the precision application of crop protection products, but also for the precision planting of seeds. How are the right conditions for planting the seeds, the right spacing among the seeds, and all these kind of things. And very importantly also, of course, and it's getting more and more relevant because of the connection with the value chain, is the sustainability aspects related to how the farmers are actually farming in the land. And this is very important because this connects them or gives them access to value chain players who are more and more often looking at carbon footprint of the crops that they are sourcing. A lot of the movement is going on low carbon intensity crops. And this is going to be fundamental also, especially for those peri-urban areas where we have the production of crops very closely to urbanized cities. In my next slide, I would just like to share with you some of the potential that we have, with really trying to look very deeply, with technology, the data management systems, and then a state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, looking very deeply into the soil. By looking at different soil maps, we have a system, it's called InterraScan. InterraScan is basically looking at the soil in different types of layers. And this gives a lot of information for the farmers to really try to define how much fertilizer they need to apply into their land, how much nutrients do they have. And by doing that, we can actually adjust the parameters for application of different, not only on fertilizer, but also the application of biological products, optimizing irrigation and optimizing, the way farmers can actually do or run their farm. So this is very important, not only to drive the yields, but also, as it was also mentioned previously, to try to reduce the cost and increment soil health in the peri-urban area. So I'm very pleased to have a conversation with you where innovation, data management systems is going to be fundamental to continue fostering circular economy in the peri-urban areas. Back to you, Ernie.
Thank you very much, Zuzui, and we'll be back with questions. I'm doing double duty today. In addition to moderating, I was originally a panel member, and they wanted me to present a couple of slides to you, so I'm going to do that here as we close out our panel presentation and get ready for Q&A. I said in my introduction, I spend my days working with farmers of all sizes, scales, and scopes and types of operations, primarily in the United States, but increasingly we're finding ways to partner and collaborate with farmers across the world. And the central question we're often asked is, why does this matter? What does the circular bioeconomy really mean to a farmer? And we've been asking ourselves that. Why is it important? If you go to the next slide, it really is a conversation about transitioning back to the way we often used to farm. In the evolving state of production agriculture, we become super efficient at all landscapes, from large farms, thousands of hectares, down to half-acre urban farms. We've become very, very efficient, but that's also meant we've been very, very linear. And what we're trying to move from is this approach of take, make, and dispose as you produce food at whatever scale, small or large, to one where we're much more intentionally thinking about ways that we can make, reuse, recycle, and retain value. And that's a different mindset. But when I think back to the farming systems of a generation or two ago, a good example in the United States would be integrated livestock cropping systems. It was very, very common to have animals and cropping systems in a what we now call circular system, where they were working together, where the livestock were producing valuable nutrients that would go into the production of crops. Crops were then fed back to animals, and there was an interdependence there that provided benefits. So the next slide really goes to the transition that we're going through. And this is a little bit of a busy slide, but it's trying to represent the new way forward, where we're moving from an era where we were very, very government-centric and very much focused on trying to change the way farmers are operating, oftentimes through directives and mandates and regulations or preferred approaches that were being pushed down to farmers who were struggling to survive and be sustainable first so they could be profitable. And what we found is that in the 21st century renaissance of agriculture that's occurring across the globe, we're becoming much less silo management and much less dealing with one problem a day. And now we're dealing with the need to integrate and deal with not just how do I sustainably produce high quality nutritious food in an urban landscape in the suburbs of Nairobi as an example, but concurrently, how do I deal with water management issues that may be affecting water quality in the community? How do I deal with the opportunity to deliver clean energy solutions? How do I deal with invasive species that are showing up in my farming operation? How do I deal with potentially the loss of biodiversity? A farmer thinks about all of these things concurrently. And sometimes as program managers and advocates for problem solving, we're so focused on our particular issue that we forget that the farmer has to put them all together. So the circular approach to farming is a way to do that, to be thinking more holistically and to be thinking about not just the production of milk or soy or a fresh fruit or vegetable or some type of animal protein. Sure, that's going to be a primary output of farms in a circular bioeconomy. But the exciting part of our evolving future in a bioeconomy is that we can currently produce other high value, what people call today ecosystem services, that are going to deliver solutions to SDG attainment. So the world is desperately seeking solutions to these 17 big, audacious, sustainable development goals. And when we think about farming systems that are more circular, we can not only address SDG 2 and improve food security and malnutrition, but we can currently sequester carbon. We can filter and store water. We can enhance biodiversity. We can deliver what the world is looking for. So that's I think, ultimately what's going to be a big driver here. And my last slide really speaks to the value of circular systems to farmers. And it comes really back down to increasing their retained value, whether they're increasing the use of shared on-farm resources or decreasing, in some cases, the reliance on purchased inputs. What we're migrating to is improvements in productivity, profitability, and ecosystem service delivery. And for a farmer, if we can show how that can be delivered in a way that saves them money and makes money, it's going to replicate and spread much more quickly. So those are my observations and thoughts working with farmers in the United States and other parts of the world about the opportunity that circularity in the bioeconomy presents. And I'm sure all of us have had opportunities to experience farming in different sizes and scales. And from a personal standpoint, I live in the state of Maryland in the United States, and there has been an explosion of interest in urban farming in Baltimore City, not unlike what's happening in other cities around the world. And I had an opportunity to tour what was an amazing small-scale urban farm in the agri-hood section of Baltimore, and saw amazing examples of innovation and sharing and circular systems where they were following a dream to transition and get back to producing nutritious food in their own backyards. And it was literally in their own backyards. So there are so many opportunities to share experiences from the work we've been doing for decades in rural landscapes and connecting them with urban and peri-urban landscapes, utilizing some of the same principles and many of the same tools. So thank you for listening. I hope you followed my suggestion of jotting down notes for questions here, because we're now going to go into our about a 20-minute period of conversation with our audience before we have closing remarks from His Excellency the Ambassador from Kenya, who's been listening carefully and I'm sure trying to figure out what's a way to close all this. But thank you for being so patient, for volunteering to be our closing speaker. So with that, let me just start as you thinking about your questions with just a couple of questions back to our panel. Andy, you kicked us off giving us an overview, talked about trust, which I heard a number of our panel members talk about, along with the need for innovation and data. Can you give us an example of how technology is improving supply chain logistics in the dairy industry in an urban, peri-urban landscape?
Because you can go in with drones and spray small holdings in China or Africa where you don't have the big macro technology across 1,000-acre farms. But also, the trust thing, and I notice even in Africa, most countries in the world have cell phone technology now. They've let the technology divide. It might not be smartphones, but it will come very quickly. And then the key issue then is who owns the data that is automatically sunk, to Peter's point. There's a lot of people are asking the question, when my data disappears into a framework, who owns that data versus who has access to it? And there are some people arguing that the data should be in some way in the agricultural sector under some sort of co-op format, to the extent the farmer owns it, or you have to give your permission to do it. So the trust thing is a big one, but people are moving very fast when you can sync it and automatically get it back. And if the food producers get the link between lowering my inputs, I can make more money by having more accurate information, the adoption rate is exponential. But it's a logarithmic curve. You spend a long time of slow uptake until you get across that threshold of trust. And the issue is, where's the threshold of trust?
Peter, you talked about the need to simplify data collection and enhance data sharing. And in an urban, peri-urban landscape environment where technology may be a limiting factor, what's being done to bring forward new decision support tools that a farmer can actually use to collect data, interpret data, and make better decisions?
Yeah, I think unfortunately today, not a lot. I think what we tend to find is as many farms as you go to, you're going to find as many different ways that they're trying to capture and synthesize that information. What we really want to try to get people to, we sort of take a step back. We've always believed in sort of a crawl, walk, run methodology. Not walk into a farm and try to immediately overnight turn them into the best of the best, because it will end in failure. It's really trying to assess where is that operation at in terms of its data capture and analysis today. What level of adoption have they already sort of taken on? What level of commitment do they have to that? And at least start trying to move to a crop-based understanding of what's happening. What I mean by that is we don't necessarily have to start getting to every nickel or every bit of money and where does that need to get allocated on an income statement, for example. What we need to do is start understanding how much is it costing to grow each one of those crops. So in an urban, peri-urban environment, that may literally be, what is it costing to grow basil, what is it costing to grow tomatoes, whatever it is that you're trying to grow in that setting, and understand the allocation of expenses for growing that particular crop. So back to your original question, there are lots of ways people are doing it. My fear is in most cases, they're just not getting to the point of having that information. And really, at best, what they're getting to is how much money is coming in and how much money is going out the door, and no real sense of how that money is being spent on the different types of products that they're trying to grow. So again, I encourage everybody, we need to take a step of, this is a marathon, not a sprint. We need to just take steps to improve the reporting capabilities, the data capture capabilities of these organizations, and not try to overnight just overwhelm with entirely new systems and ways of capturing information.
Thank you. So Zoe, you talked a lot about precision farming systems, the evolution and introduction of biologicals as tools in our toolbox, and I kept thinking as you were talking about that very point, that we need multiple tools in the toolbox. And so often when we're here with colleagues at FAO, we hear others advocating for only certain types of tools in the toolbox. What suggestions do you have for member states that are with us here at this event to help them to unlock barriers to delivering all of these types of innovative tools? Any thoughts there based on your experience in multiple landscapes around the world?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ernie, for this question. Yeah, we're extremely concerned about the fact that farmers are under very high pressure and losing technologies very often. And I think what is quite important also for policymakers is to fully understand, the farming conditions where farmers are operating. Farming conditions in Europe cannot be comparable with farming conditions in other parts of the world, like Brazil or US or even some Asian countries, right? So I think it's important in order to enable farmers to continue actually doing the great job that they are doing. We need to help, with technologies and the innovation that is needed. So actually just setting challenges on accessing the toolkits that they need is just putting more pressure on their shoulders. So farmers are already dealing with many, many challenges. The prices of the crops, right? So they need to go into the market, they need to sell their crops. Price is a very important element, a big challenge. A lot of the investment that they need to do in the farm level, peri-urban areas, very important investment also there for some of the technology, sensors or these kind of things, what are very innovative. In addition to that, they are also dealing with the volatile weather conditions. And we are seeing that this risk is not being shared. So basically they are definitely in the big pressure, with all these challenges. On the top of that, if they are restricted, in terms of the technologies that they need to use in order to cope with all of these challenges, I think the situation gets even more complex. So my recommendation, and it's in a very humble way, would be really to understand fully how the cropping systems for the farmers are really dealing at a very local level. So one size fits all will not work in farming, right? Farming is really a topic of very local level. So even within a country, you can actually have different types of systems for farming. So you really need to fully understand what are the big challenges of farmers, how could you enable them in order that they can thrive. productivity is a very important topic. This is really top of the agenda. If farmers continue being producing, at a very high rates, this could help us to actually mitigate any other potential negative aspects like land use. Land, as we have been discussing here, is very restricted in urban and peri-urban areas. But land is going to be in a massive competition in the future because, of course, we don't only need to produce food, we also produce fuels, we produce fibers, and in the future, we have a very, very strong push from the chemical sector to get renewable feedstock from the land. On the top of that, you have the urbanization. So you can imagine all these coming together, and if farmers are not accessing the right technologies, I think the challenge is going to be manifold. So my recommendation, as I just mentioned, please try to reflect the local conditions, the local realities of farmers, and try really to understand how to support the growers at the local level rather than trying to implement one size fits all.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, folks, we're now opening the floor to you for questions. You've been very patiently listening. I've seen a number of hands. Let me start with Paul Temple from the Global Farmers Network.
Some really useful presentations. Thank you very much. Peter, there's a number of problems. I am a beef and arable farmer in the UK, and I've been a numbers man all my life. But my only bomb-proof data is on paper. And my utter frustration is the sheer cost of modern data. I have lost so much data because each time software changes, it doesn't follow through. And my real frustration is you'll have a good software company bought out by private equity that then sells it on, assures me my data won't be lost, and it is lost. And now it's all on the cloud, and my ability to use it isn't maybe what it was, but my enthusiasm to use it is becoming really jaded. And I have asked this question, where is this data? When it's held on the cloud, as everything seems to be, nobody has yet given me an answer, and nobody actually talks about the cost of maintaining that data wherever it is on the planet.
Big challenge. So who wants to tackle that one? Peter, how about you?
I could start, and you guys can add the real answers. I'll give you my thought. I 100% agree with everything you just said. They are all very real concerns. I have a significant level of concern of so many of these ag-focused technology startups that sort of get anywhere in their life, immediately get bought up by private equity, and significant changes happen. And we've seen many cases where once they get bought up either by private equity or strategic investors in the existing supply chain, they become an afterthought, and all of a sudden they fall apart. And so you raise a very real concern. My hope going forward is a little bit of this is we're still very much in the infancy stage of ag tech. There was too much money flowing around, and so too many probably got started that really shouldn't have been, and I think we're starting to see many of those kind of retreat. I am hopeful that as adoption increases and as we increase the interoperability of these systems, that we will find some of these become long-standing players, that we don't have to worry about whether they're going to exist in another year or not. I do think a little bit of what we're seeing right now is the world just adjusting to having ag tech systems, and there's going to be winners and losers in that world, and unfortunately it means we're going to have data that gets lost, or we're going to have data that no longer is usable in that format. I think if we look at just about every other industry on the planet, they've been through some level of this in the past. If we were speaking, for example, about indoor manufacturing, they've been through all of this before. They have really robust and interoperable ERP systems or enterprise planning systems available to them. And that's what we're trying to move more towards in agriculture. I just think it's going to take time like it did in all of these other industries. But I 100% agree with what you said and feel your pain.
Just quickly, Paul, we've had exactly the same issue in New Zealand, and the reality of trying to integrate this data has been far more difficult than the theory. We've come a long way in the last 18 months because everybody wanted to own the data. So the principle was if you owned data, you had an income stream. and knocking over that principle to say that nobody owns the data, it's access to the data, was quite important. So we are getting some integration now, but in our case, with a co-op with 8,500 farmers, we can push the intergenerational aspect of it. It will be there forever unless we stuff something up. So that philosophy is quite important, because you're right. If people think it's going to disappear in 5 years' time because there's a change of system, that breaks the trust barrier.
To close out, responding, this issue is on PSM's agenda. Last year, we held an event at CFS 51 that Anthony Marithi moderated in our audience today, where we were presenting data management guideline recommendations. So it is a journey that we're on, and it's great to see that our Kenyan co-host today is really deep into this and providing some experience and expertise, helping to facilitate these conversations within FAO. So Anthony, thank you for that. Probably time for one more question, or two quick ones. Chris, and then in the back.
Hi, Chris Manley from the UK Beef and Sheep Farmer, and work in the value chain. Having had a lot of sort of data platforms present to me that are sort of the solution for farmers and the supply chain, a lot of these food businesses are obviously looking for that data to demonstrate carbon footprints, other things. Farmers are giving the information willingly. Should farmers be paid for their data? And also, if so, have you seen any good models that sort of reflect what farmers are doing?
One on.
I think, Chris, it comes back to what farmers perceive the value to be. So I can only give an example of what we've done, in a dairy co-op, which has given insights report at the end of the year, which asks more questions as much as gives answers, but it's starting to benchmark productivity, with some of the things that interest farmers, but also high correlation to carbon footprint and so on. I think it's what you give back will drive the trust in what you give, and I think sometimes we start from the wrong end of that spectrum. So it's actually the feedback is the number place you should start, rather than the what do we give.
Ernie, if I could add just one thing, I 100% agree. I think that is right. Whether the farm should own its data, they absolutely should own it, and whether there is then an income stream that can be recognized from that, or as you say, a chance to opt in for some sort of circular feedback in that you provide information and therefore you get access to aggregated benchmarking data, for example. There ought to be some sort of level of return, but the farm should own their data. That's my take.
One more question before we go to closing
Oh,
remarks.
Ernie, can I share a thought?
Suzui?
Yeah,
Go
sorry. I wanted to share on that question. I think the question is fundamental, because it's not only about the data, it's about what is the request behind that. The first request is, of course, about the data. The second request is about the value chain asking growers to reduce the carbon footprint. Because at the end of the day, reduced carbon footprints is going to be fundamental for the value chain to decarbonize, right? And everything is happening at the farm level. I truly believe the farmers need to be rewarded for all the efforts that they are doing at the farm level. The farmers should own the data, and the farmers should actually get that benefit of reducing the carbon footprint. When we are talking about low carbon commodities, so this should be actually something that the value chain should absorb as a cost rather than staying with the farmer. So it's a question that it has two sides, and this is what we are currently seeing heavily in the value chain. And at the moment, it's very difficult for the value chain to actually absorb this cost. So I will definitely be very happy to see that the farmers are not the ones paying for that benefit, because the benefit is for the value chain. So just to share that comment. Thank you.
Hey, Suzui, thank you very much. Last question, Donald Moore.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for an interesting panel discussion. Moving us away from data for a moment. I was interested recently to read a report from the World Resources Institute where they said that the current rate of productivity improvement in the agricultural sector globally was just under 1% per annum. and they were looking at the fact that we needed to produce, according to World WWF, we needed to produce 70% more food by 2050 to feed a growing world population. Do we have any data or statistics or information that we can share about biocircular systems that operate in the biocircular economy, and in terms of the productivity gains that can be achieved from that? Because we need to double or better our current rate of productivity improvement if we are going to feed a world in 2050 with nutritious food. That's my first question. My second question, this is probably cheeky to Ellen, is in terms of policy, what is it that governments can do to encourage more development in the peri-urban system? Where I live, in one of the outlying cities in Chicago, it is illegal to own chickens. Just as an example of the sorts of barriers that are erected to stop people really thinking about some of the simple systems that could be operated in those markets. So thank you.
Ellen, you want to take on the latter part of his question there?
I'm happy to take that on. You know, I think the simplest answer there is all about the citizenry showing up at the city council and changing the whatever regulations are governing that. I know in the city that I come from, Minneapolis, the regulations have changed and you can have a number of chickens in your backyard.
I'll just move to Minneapolis then.
So there is hope, and this is an ongoing conversation with policymakers at all levels. So,
just one thing I'd add in there, Donald. I think we need to go down a layer in terms of this, volume of food. When you look under the data, we're not as short of the macronutrients, i.e., fat, protein, carbohydrate, as we are the micronutrients. And so we need to look at food quality, leaving waste to the side, which is another big one, and that comes into the circular argument. But food quality with micronutrients, and we know in the plant space, wheat and rice are the biggest contributors globally in the micronutrient, and vegetables in the plant space. But dairy and the micronutrient quality is a key additive. So we need to get into the balance between micro and macronutrients and food density, rather than just having a broad brush approach to we need more food, because I think it's a very lazy argument.
so this has been a fascinating discussion that we could continue all day, and we will once the session ends here, for those who want to stay and have some additional side conversations. But we are wrapping up, and we're down now to our closing remarks. And we are so fortunate today to have His Excellency Ambassador Frederick Atwanga, the permanent representative for the head of the mission for Kenya in Italy, and he serves as Kenya's permanent representative to the Rome-based agencies. The ambassador has been instrumental in fostering strong diplomatic relations between Kenya and Italy, as well as other countries under his accreditation, such as Albania and Cyprus, Greece, and Malta. His efforts have significantly contributed to enhanced trade, investment, and tourism opportunities between Kenya, these nations, and the world. So, Ambassador, thank you so much for being here and for volunteering to wrap up and distill down what you heard. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, our moderator and our host this morning. I first of all want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who has been involved in bringing up this very important discussion. Maybe from a personal perspective, when you look at the issue of linear to circular production or systems, I think this is a major transformation that the world needs more now than ever before, especially when we consider the challenges that are before us. The circular systems will help us address the issues of climate change. The circular systems will help us address the issues of food security. And these are very key challenges humanity is facing now. But coming right close to the main question, I think you had a very rich discussion, but I had a marking scheme. That is why I did not prepare closing remarks. The marking scheme was to look for whether this discussion captures the key roles of value chain partners in catalyzing and supporting sustainable peri-urban circular bioeconomy systems. I think that is the question you are all trying to answer in all this discussion. And I found that actually you have more than what I expected, what I had even thought about. In my thinking, there were around six key roles of value chain actors or partners that we could think about. And you have talked about all of them. One is the role of this transformation from linear to circular system is to ensure resource efficiency. We have diminishing resources in both land, finances, and everything else we think about, in ways of ensuring sustainable and resilient food production systems. Unless we go the circular way in a manner that we improve the way we use the little and diminishing resources that we have, then the world will be doomed. You have talked about the population that we expect by 2050, over 7 billion. We have talked about the diminishing land resources. The value chain actors should be those who want to optimize the use of these resources. Number two, the value chain actors need to ensure sustainable production and consumption systems. And from this discussion, I got it in a very varied way. When you talk about sustainability, there are so many ways you can look at it. Sustainable production and consumption in the sense that for the longer term, we need to use the resources we have and to consume for the longer term. But sustainable also, we look at it in the sense of taking care of our environment, human and social needs. The circular economy in the real sense needs to address this issue, and in this discussion we have captured this. There is the issue of market access and distribution. How do you ensure that the food that the farmers in the rural areas or in the peri-urban areas reaches the consumers? And how do we make sure that the waste that is generated by the urban and peri-urban areas is also taken to places where it can be recycled? The market access and distribution channels has been addressed in this discussion. I'm sure most of the speakers have mentioned this. There is the issue of innovation and technology. Circular economy requires a constant eye on innovation, new ways of looking at things, technologies that can help us do the recycling, whether it is for plastics, whether it's for other packaging material, so that everything seems to be evolving in a positive way. And I'm sure even the last speakers, among the questions raised, they have raised the issues of technology and innovation as part of the circular economy we are thinking about. And then there is the issue of policy and advocacy. The value chain partners, we need those who can develop relevant policies so that to make the circular economy thrive. And beyond making the relevant policies, we need those partners who will undertake the true advocacy so that everybody understands and comes to know what the transformation from the linear to the circular bioeconomy really means. And then lastly, on my marking scheme, many people talk about farmers, consumers, industrialists, or businesses. They do or they don't do what we expect of them because of lack of knowledge. Education and training is very critical in ensuring that the transformation from linear to circular economy is taken in a very structured way. But beyond this, my marking scheme, the discussion brought out two very important issues that I had not looked at. Peter mentioned the issue of the data privacy, because all the things that we are talking about, they should play within the right frame of data privacy. And then we are talking about the issue of, and of course, one of the farmers from the US talked about the challenge of keeping or obtaining relevant data. Data is important in everything you do. Even if you have to establish a recycling plant for, let's say, plastics, you need to have data on how much plastics are generated to make a business sense. If you're supposed to make fertilizer from food waste from up an area, you need to know how much food waste is so that you scale the kind of recycling plant. So data is very important. But beyond data, Peter also mentioned the issue of cybersecurity threats. All these things are related. Much as we need a lot of information to be public for businesses and other relevant actors to use, it is important to take note of the threats posed by issues of cyber security. So in my marking scheme, I think you got 110%. You went beyond my expectation. And the only challenge I leave with you is, I think this is a very rich discussion. We need to see how to carry it forward, especially in the context of food security, in the context of addressing climate change and the related threats to humanity. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for summarizing so effectively and identifying the key points that we brought up today. Going forward, as we wrap up today, this is not the end of this conversation. This is just probably the beginning. And now that FAO is embarking upon developing a global bioeconomy work plan and some type of platform, I'm sure we'll have opportunities to be contributing to that discussion and offering the benefits of circularity as they move forward with this. So thank you so much for your participation. Thank you to our co-hosts, the Kenya and the United States of America. Thank you to our co-organizers, Pinion, Syngenta, the Global Dairy Platform, and Solutions from the Land. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.